So while playoff action rages, and before anybody asks, I'm not doing a reaction video because if I do a reaction video every night, you people are going to get tired of it. And it's going to be like, you're just repetitive and you're lazy. And you'd be right. I just didn't feel like doing a reaction video tonight. I'm not going to do them every night. That way they're something different when they pop up. Oh my god, that's really good. Oh wow. This has been sitting out for a while. Smirnoff Ice, Electric Berry. Whew. I love alcohol in the States because it's cheaper. Ooh, 99 cents a bottle. That's the best 99 cents American I've spent in a long time. Oh, that feels nice going down. All right. I talked about Vegas the other day. And I said, you know, Vegas is lucky they will be as good as, and I named teams. And the question was then asked about, well, those teams didn't have a great record. Expansion teams never have a great record. Anybody who's expecting Vegas to be a playoff team in year one, it's highly unlikely. It's not impossible, given the fact that with 500 million reasons to make them a good team right off the bat, the NHL's trying, but it's not going to be that easy. Because there are 30 other teams that don't want them to be that good just yet. They don't want to be getting pushed out of the playoffs by an expansion team. So, I decided to pull some records here. Well, some old magazines. And look at expansion teams. There's no Luke Tverdovsky. Look at that. He's so young there. So, that's the 1994 draft. So, the Ducks. They had a very good expansion year. And when I said that, it was pointed out that there was not a very good record for them. Again, expansion teams almost never have a good record. But it's worthy of note because for fans in Vegas, this is the kind of thing you're likely looking at. Once the dust has settled on what your team's going to be and who's going to be on the roster, you're likely looking at Anaheim's not a bad position to end up in, and I'm going to explain why. Among the many things the expansion Mighty Ducks of Anaheim learned last season was this: the best way to overcome their nickname, which naturally invites sarcasm, is to be successful. Oh, that's right. There was tons of jokes when the Ducks came in. The Mighty Ducks of Anaheim, just the name, just the way they had Mighty Ducks first of Anaheim. It's just awful. They weren't quite as successful as their expansion counterparts in Florida, but they did this. They shared a record for the most wins by an NHL expansion team joining Florida at 33, so that's a record for an expansion team. They sold out 27 of 41 home dates and played a 98.9% capacity at the Pond, which was the name of their stadium at the time. They finished 10th in goals against average and tied St. Louis Blues with the league's 5th best save percentage at .904. A save percentage which gets you put out of the NHL now. They finished with more points than the LA Kings, Edmonton Oilers, Hartford Whalers, and Winnipeg Jets. And on the road, they were 19, 20, and 3. They were one game below 500 on the road that year. They left themselves a tough act to follow. Disney had better make a good sequel to this one. The Ducks did almost everything right in their first season. After winning just 5 and tying 2 of their first 20 games, they went 28, 32, and 3 the rest of the way. So they were 4 games below 500 after their first 20 games. Again, that's a very good record because it's a brand new team, and they were all cast-offs from other teams. Success came through hard work. Top scorer Terry Yake had just 52 points and was one of only 2 players on the team, Bob Corcoran was the other, to crack 20 goals. Even with an upgrade in talent, the Ducks will be hard-pressed to match last season's success. The movie that bears the name was disappointing as a sequel. Will the same thing happen to the real team? And yeah, D2. My God. The original was stupid, and then the second one was just an abomination, and then it just got worse from there. Whereas the Ducks franchise has actually emerged from that shadow quite nicely. They were 4th in the Pacific. They were 20th overall. Missed the playoffs. Power play was 14.4%, 26th overall. They had the worst power play. That 14.4%, interestingly, still better than Vancouver's was this year in the NHL. Just a little bit of a notice there. Their penalty killing was 82.7%, which was 7th overall. And their only off-season acquisition was Tom Kurvers. But they had Paul Kariya coming up. They had Oleg Tverdovsky coming up. Things look good. And they drafted 4th in their expansion year. So let's go take a look at Florida, which was that same year. Florida Panthers. During success in Montreal is a Stanley Cup. Success in Miami is coming within one game of making the playoffs. Despite the fact the Florida Panthers went 0-4-4 down the stretch and lost the right to be cannon fodder for the Rangers in the first round, the season was viewed by all as an unequivocal success. In their first season, the Panthers set expansion records for the most points with 83. There was an 84-game NHL season that year. Most road wins with 18, longest unbeaten streak 9 games, and tied the Mighty Ducks of Anaheim for the most wins with 33. Part of the management team responsible for the Panthers' terrific year, general manager Bob Clark, left to join the Philadelphia Flyers. That went really well. Team president Bill Torrey handled the GM chores through the early summer until former Detroit Red Wings coach GM Brian Murray was hired in August. At the 75-game point in the standings, the Panthers looked playoff bound. They even held a 9-point advantage over the New York Islanders, but stumbled down the stretch and lost their scoring touch. The Panthers won't be any more offensive this season, so they'll again have to win games with coach Roger Nielsen's rigid defensive system and outstanding goaltending. Aside from their lack of offense, the Panthers' biggest concern will be to avoid shark syndrome. After making strides in their first season, the San Jose Sharks fell back and posted one of the worst seasons in NHL history. So they finished 33, 34, and 17. Fifth in the Atlantic, 16th overall, missed playoffs, had a 15.9% power play, 21st overall. Their penalty killing was 82.6, and 9th overall. Off-season acquisitions, Danny Lawrence in goal, and Randy Moller on defense. I believe Randy Moller is a interviewer for Florida broadcasts on Fox Sports. Somebody may want to correct me on that if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure. And Ed Jovanovski was upcoming at the time. So again, this was Florida's first season. And their second season, they had... Oh, that's interesting. There's Jim Benning for the Florida Panthers. So, Jim Benning, who I don't think was an expansion draft pickup. I think he was traded there. I see Brian Benning, who's his brother. I don't see Jim, which tells me they got something wrong here. They show Brian Benning, defenseman. Wow, you guys are just all over the map on this. How did I not notice this before? Brian Benning wasn't a defenseman. Jim Benning was. They got Brian Benning, defenseman, on their roster. They got Brian Benning in the Panthers scoring, and they got Jim Benning underneath. And that is a picture of Brian Benning. Wow, that's stunning. That's stunning. Maybe they moved Brian Benning back to defense, and I don't know. Draft picks, Ed Jovanovski was number 1 that year, and in terms of prospects, they had a lot of nothing. Kevin Weeks as a goaltender. He was the goaltender of the future for Florida, moved on to be the goaltender of the future for the Canucks, was the goaltender of the future for the Rangers, goaltender of the future for Carolina, then he was goaltender of the present for a year, moved on to be goaltender of the future for Tampa, goaltender of the future in New Jersey, and he's a broadcaster now. So there's Florida. That's the most successful expansion team. Nashville. Nashville, their opening season. That's goalie Mike Dunham. No sophomore jinx for hardworking club. They're just 1 year old, but they're no longer the newest team in the league. And while some of the faces will change for the Nashville Predators, the slow but steady approach will not, even as the Atlanta Thrashers begin play this season, as well as the Columbus Blue Jackets and Minnesota Wild in 2000-2001. So for fans who are freaking out, saying, oh my god, my team could lose a player this year. My team could lose a player. 4 expansion teams came into the league in 4 years. Teams lost 4 players. At least, very least, they could. For the most part, they didn't lose 4 roster players, but you're losing depth into your organization, and you're spreading the talent thinner in the NHL. So when I hear anybody say, oh, Vegas, that's just going to dilute the talent pool, oh, you fools. Just wait till your league goes from 21 to 30 in less than a decade and tell me what that does to the talent pool. Because that's part of what created the trap being the prevalent system all around the NHL. Oh, the Rangers tied at 2-2. Good. Sorry. If you're a Rangers fan, or if you're a Canadiens fan, I'm sorry, but that's just my opinion. all right, me cheering for a team doesn't help them. Really doesn't. Just look at my reaction videos the last couple of days. I wore Oilers, they lost. I wore Leafs, they lost. Pretty soon fans are going to be like, can you stop wearing our jerseys? Thanks. All right. This is a franchise that wants to build from within, maintain a manageable payroll, and keep its growing fan base interested for the long haul. This is still what Nashville's doing. So year one is important, and it's important to keep track of what Vegas is doing because Nashville has never deviated from this. Not even a little. They've never taken a shortcut to get good. We're always looking to get better next year than the season before, GM Poyle said. We're still looking at the long term, but we want to improve. We want to be involved in the playoffs sooner rather than later. The Panthers had the lowest payroll in the league last season and aren't likely to increase it much, but do expect to sign most of their own restricted free agents. On the ice, Nashville is built for speed, but they must get bigger, especially on defense, and tougher. And Cliff Roning's picture's on here because Cliff Roning was fantastic. While they flirted with the playoff race for most of last season, they need more offense and goaltender Mike Dunham to play far more than 44 games in 1990-2000 if they are to advance beyond scrappy status. It says scrappy. We are still presenting this as an opportunity for our players, GM David Poyle said. They can make the most of that, or we might have to look in another direction. We tried to keep our options open in many respects. On the bookkeeping side, they have several restricted free agents, but are unlikely to plunge into the unrestricted free agent market. Poyle doesn't expect anyone on next year's roster to make more than center Cliff Roning's $1.75 million salary. Cliff Roning was woefully underpaid for his services in the NHL. Woefully underpaid. So, Cliff, if you're watching this, I got your back. Thus, the look of the second-year Panthers will differ only slightly from that of last year's team. Still, they expect to improve upon their inaugural season's 28 wins and hope to stay in the playoff hunt a little longer this time around. The high-character, high-speed efforts of this 98, if it can be repeated and even bettered, especially if left-winger Ville Peltonen dresses for 82 games. And they need David Legwand to successfully begin his rise to being the team's first impact player. So Legwand was a number 2 draft pick. They tried to build around him. Middling success, but because of the fact that Nashville was always built as a team instead of just here's your superstar and we'll build around it, it was built around the idea of here's our 4 lines, here's our 6 defensemen, here's our goaltender, and we're gonna make this mix work. That's always been the way Nashville plays. I watched them do it again last night. That's their identity, and that's part of the reason I cheer for the Nashville Predators. So yeah, in their first season, they had a record of 28, 47, and 7. They finished 24th overall in a league of 28 teams. So they did not finish last. As an expansion team, if you do not finish last in the NHL, that's huge. Because you're a brand new team. All the guys you've got are either cast-offs from other teams that you got as an expansion pickup, or they're guys that a team goes, look, we're trying to get rid of this guy. Do you want him? So that's what ends up being the makeup of expansion teams. Now, I'm not going to get into Atlanta. Atlanta was a disaster. I'm not... I mean the Atlanta Thrashers, not the Atlanta Flames. I'm not going that far back because expansion's changed since then more than has changed since this. Columbus. As the Columbus Blue Jackets put the wraps on their first successful season last spring, the word foundation made its way into more and more dressing room discussions. And look at that beautiful jersey to build a foundation on. There's Ron Tugnut and Derek Sanderson. Tugnut, propping up crap teams his entire career. Everyone from GM President Doug MacLean to the coaching staff to the players and beyond realized the Blue Jackets had accumulated more talent, more wins, and more fans than they had a right to expect as an expansion team. The challenge before them now is obvious. Build on it. The Blue Jackets will try to continue the growth at a steady and responsible rate. There will be 7 or 8 new faces this year, including defenseman and Calder Trophy candidate Rusty Klesla. McLean went shopping in the free agent market, got Mike Sillinger, a player Columbus hopes can add depth down the middle. Defensively, the Blue Jackets are good and getting better, not surprising considering they're coached by Dave King. Stay tuned. At the end of last season, several Blue Jackets said the goal this year is to make the Stanley Cup playoffs. That might be a bit of a reach. They finished with 71 points and they were 13th in the Western Conference, but a climb toward the 80-point range is not out of the question. They finished with 28 wins, 39 losses, 15 overtime losses, and they were 23rd overall in the NHL out of 30 teams. They were not the worst team in the league. So again, you're not going to get fantastic results, but you're not going to get bad ones either. Minnesota. Scoring primary goal for competitive crew. For most teams, a measly 25 victories and a mere 68 points would be a reason to clean house. But in Minnesota, those expansion totals were enough to raise the roof. Now the question is, can the Wild improve upon a season that exceeded everyone's expectations? Columbus drafted experienced older players. Minnesota went younger. Minnesota got more the fringe guys. When people looked at Minnesota's roster before their expansion season started, there were predictions of 10, 15 wins. This team's going to be awful. What are they thinking? Like, it was just supposed to be awful. They built an identity on defense and goaltending. They gutted out 25 wins, and they finished 25th in the league. So they were still better than 5 teams in the NHL. They were still better than 5 teams in the NHL with 25 wins, 39 losses, and 18 overtime points via overtime losses. However, overachieving expansion teams typically have a rough go the second time around. Players become a little more secure. Opponents become more prepared, and the honeymoon with the fans and media end. Certainly, no one expects the Wild to make a leap into the postseason in 2001-2002. Improvement is anticipated, but that won't be easy because the Wild set so high a bar last year. There's goaltender Manny Fernandez, and the Wild have made a franchise based on propping up goaltenders who, how do I put this, otherwise weren't very good. Outside of Minnesota, a lot of their goaltenders weren't great. And, Jamie McLennan looked fantastic in Minnesota. Dwayne Rolison's career was based a lot on what he did in Minnesota. He was good elsewhere too, but Rolison was best in Minnesota. Manny Fernandez was great in Minnesota and never had that anywhere else. Not really. Not like he did in Minnesota. So it's funny now when I'm looking at the playoffs, I'm looking at Devin Dubnyk, and it's like, yep, Minnesota is still taking goaltenders that are okay and making them look great through good coaching. They seem to have always had great coaches for their goaltenders and just really strong scouting and knowing what works. So I'll come back to Vegas. Vegas has the GM. Now they have the coach. They seem to know what they're doing. A bar to set for Vegas next year is that the record for an expansion team is 33 wins. With the shootout now being in the NHL, which it wasn't back then, they can hit that mark. If Vegas goes anywhere over 33 wins, the season's a success. Making the playoffs, out of the question. Making the playoffs is out of the question, for the most part. Because, again, they'd be looking at trying to be one of the top 16 teams out of 31. I can't see it happening with an expansion team. $500 million or not. But the bar has to be 33 wins and higher. And I really believe that's what they're gunning for. Let me know in the comments below what you think. Where do you think the bar should be set? And in terms of an expansion team, if you're McPhee, what's your goal? Because some teams that don't do very well off the start, and San Jose wasn't great off the start, and Ottawa was awful. In some cases, the teams that start out really bad can actually be better later. So it's tricky, because part of what happens with these teams, these expansion teams that come in and finish 5 or 6 steps above worst, they don't get those prime franchise players in the draft. Those end up going to the teams that are, tanking to do the full rebuild. So it's a balancing act. Let me know what you guys think. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. And don't worry for anybody who's saying, what about the playoffs? Talking about the playoffs soon. Tonight. I'm definitely talking about the playoffs. It's Friday night. I'm up. I got some Smirnoff here to help me stay up and alert, because that's what alcohol does, right? I'm pretty sure that's what alcohol does. All right. Thanks for watching. I'll talk to you all again soon.